This video was originally uploaded last week on my gaming channel SideQuest. There's a long list of upcoming game reviews, here are a few examples, with the next one being Wing Commander 3. I'm aiming to have a new one out each month, so follow the link below to subscribe to SideQuest and stay up to date on all the new uploads. One of the earliest videos on this channel was a wee video essay about why, overall, Star Trek video games are kinda pish. A lot of them are paint-by-numbers texture swaps of some generic version of a particular genre, with uninspired stories and a general failure to capture the essence of what makes Star Trek Star Trek. But an exception to this rule which I mentioned in that video was the 2000 first-person shooter from Raven Software, Star Trek Voyager Elite Force. And after revisiting that game for the video, it made me want to replay it over again, so I decided, why not make a full review of it? Star Trek video games have been around for almost as long as the franchise has existed. Most of them are point-and-click adventure games with some kind of space combat simulator, strategy or otherwise. It wasn't until the mid-90s Star Trek started to really branch out into other video game genres. When Activision acquired the license, it soon announced a slew of new titles which included Away Team and Bridge Commander. Star Trek Voyager Elite Force was developed by Raven Software, known at the time for previous shooters such as Heretic and Soldier of Fortune. They developed Elite Force on the id Tech 3 engine, which at the time was powering Quake Arena 3. While they did take a lot of inspiration from the likes of Quake and Doom, they were also heavily influenced by Half-Life, because everyone was influenced by Half-Life at the time. They wanted a spectacular cinematic campaign which made players feel like they were part of a Star Trek Voyager episode. But while there was a lot of love for Star Trek, Activision also wanted the game to appeal to regular first-person shooter fans as well. There were high hopes for the game, and while it met with critical success, unfortunately it fell short of the projected sales numbers. Despite this, however, Raven continued supporting the game with patches and expansions, and over time fan appreciation for the game grew. It was followed up by a sequel in 2003, and the Hazard team has appeared in graphic novels, comic books, and other media now and again. The game is set sometime in the 4th or 5th seasons of Star Trek Voyager. To better protect the ship from numerous threats they've encountered, Tuvok creates the Hazard team, an elite squad of Special Forces security officers with special technology and a larger assortment of weapons. As the team trains, Voyager encounters a hostile ship, which soon pulls them into a region of space inhabited by a spaceship graveyard. Thus, it's up to the crew of the Voyager and the Hazard team to fight off raiders, discover the origins of the spaceship graveyard, and eventually escape with their lives. Presentation-wise, the game hasn't aged all that well graphically, but that's to be expected with a game this old. The environments actually mostly look great. There's a wide range of colours, and hopping between different ships means there aren't many reused assets. Each level has its own unique atmosphere and aesthetic. It's the character models which don't hold up that well. But again, that's expected for the times. I think in terms of overall presentation, what lets the game down somewhat is the sound design and the music. Games like Star Trek Legacy and Encounters have awesome soundtracks with really memorable themes. But Elite Force's soundtrack is really forgettable, it just kind of fades into the background most of the time. The weapon sounds are overall really good and do pack a punch, but sometimes they do feel like stock sound effects. What's also a little weird is the sound mixing. Oftentimes the music and ambient sound end up drowning out the dialogue.
Since we don't know where the Borg may be storing the isodesium, I've chosen a beam-in point within reasonable proximity to a primary sub-processing matrix. From there, I should be able to determine the exact location of the isodesium.
If there weren't any subtitles, I'd really struggle to hear what's going on some of the time. And it's a shame too because overall the voice acting is really good. Originally, everyone from the Voyager cast, except Jerry Ryan, reprised their roles for the game, although Ryan was later patched in. The other voice actors playing the Hazard team are also really strong, but we'll talk more about those characters in a second. Gameplay-wise, this is a really solid shooter. It finds a good balance between being an action-packed power fantasy and a more gritty, tactics-focused shooter. The levels are nicely designed to give the player expansive areas for large-scale action, and more claustrophobic hallways when they're trying to advance to the next area. Much like Half-Life, the shooting sections are broken up by platforming and puzzle-type parts. The shooting itself is really solid and fun, but it could get monotonous if that's all the game had to offer. So these quieter sections really help break up the pace and gives the player valuable downtime. Although some of these puzzle-esque parts do follow some head-scratching adventure game style logic, like my weapon can destroy this metal crate no problem so I can get into this next room, but I have to move this weird laser thing to destroy a chair, despite the fact I'm carrying a personal photon torpedo launcher. Yes, you heard that right by the way, a personal photon torpedo launcher. How cool is that? When it comes to weapons, Elite Force really delivers the goods here. There's your standard Starfleet issue hand phaser and phaser rifle, but on top of that is the I-Mod, a weapon specifically designed to take on the Borg, this Raider machine gun / grenade launcher thing, a regular grenade launcher which shoots bouncing explosives which you can get really inventive with. There's a few more good ones, but I'll mention those when talking about the campaign. I will say though, the ammo system is a bit weird. There's two types of ammo you can get, energy from energy recharge stations, and ammunition crystals from ammunition crystal bits. But what the game decides is an energy weapon and an ammo weapon is a bit strange. For example, the grenade and photon torpedo launchers are apparently both energy-based weapons, despite the fact they both fire projectiles. It seems like the developers decided all Starfleet-made weapons are energy-based and all non-Starfleet weapons are ammo-based. What that means though is that if you run out of energy on one energy-based weapon, they're all empty, and vice versa for ammo-based weapons. This may seem unfair, but there is a logic to it. Some weapons will only work well against certain enemies. For example, Borg drones are easily dispatched with the I-Mod, but will put up a good fight against a standard phaser rifle or simply adapt to it. Other enemy types will have stronger resistance to certain weapons and so on. This keeps you on your toes when it comes to finding ammo and choosing which weapon you're using. You don't get complacent. Although that being said, it's unlikely you'll have any real difficulty finding ammo. Another issue I have with Elite Force is that it's actually really easy for the most part. I'd recommend setting it to the hardest difficulty, otherwise you'll just breeze through a lot of this game. I have a few quibbles with the campaign, but in general it's a good one. We start off on a Borg cube where you have to rescue your captured teammates. It's a decent showcase of the game's mechanics and gives you a taste of what facing the Borg is like. However, this is revealed to be a training simulation which the player character fails by being too impatient and not following protocol. This sets up a kind of mentor-pupil dynamic between the protagonist Ensign Monroe and Tuvok. After Voyager encounters a hostile alien craft and is pulled into the spaceship graveyard, the ship is soon boarded by raiders which you have to fight off. Now, I do have a soft spot for Voyager as a show, and just like in Star Trek Online, it made me smile to inhabit the ship which has been so faithfully recreated in a lot of detail. The game is also able to convey how different tactics are needed to take on different enemies by having you face these raiders. The Borg basically surround you and march towards you at all times, but these raiders, made up of Klingons and Terrans among others, will use cover and hurl grenades at you, and if the Klingons are wounded, they'll just charge your position. You'll want to outflank them, but if you're too cocky, you can get stuck behind enemy lines pretty quickly. It's just a good way to show you should employ some strategy when dealing with the enemies in the game. After fending off the raiders, a briefing outlined the next mission, to visit a nearby alien ship to try and find more answers about this region of space and what's going on. Afterwards, there's some nice downtime with the rest of the team. As you prep, you can explore various rooms and initiate dialogue with the team. This lets you get to know them and what their thoughts on previous or upcoming missions are. There's no dialogue tree obviously, this isn't an RPG, but it did give me that kind of Mass Effect type feel. While the characters are quite two-dimensional, they have fun personalities and enjoyable banter between one another. I quite like this level, it's got a cool aesthetic and the ambient sound design is really otherworldly. Figuring out what components of the ship actually do and how you can use them to get around the area is really rewarding. The weakness of the level though is its ending, story-wise, where it turns out the aliens mistook the Hazard team for raiders and attacked out of self-defense.
We're sorry for the misunderstanding, for killing some of your people. We were only acting in self-defense.
Kill? Have not killed. When injured, our people returned to stasis, regenerated. Your people too, not killed, in stasis, analyzed.
I mean, I literally vaporized some of your friends, but I guess if they can hibernate their way out of that somehow, no harm, no foul. Next we jump over to the Raider base to grab some MacGuffin juice to make the ship go. This is a really fan-pleasing level as the base is made up of several different types of ships, inhabited by a variety of aliens including some TOS-era Terrans. Some parts of the level are meant to be stealth-focused, but I absolutely suck at stealth games, so these never went right for me. But while sneaking around in some vents, there's some nice dialogue to be overheard from some of the enemies. I also really like how the level constantly shifts between the differing art styles of the factions which make up the base. There's Klingon, Terran, Hirogen, Malon. Again, it's all fan service, but it's fan service of the fun kind. Near the end of the level you face a minor Hirogen boss, but again, you really need the game on max difficulty to get the blood pumping with this one. But after defeating him, you can grab his weapon and... Damn, boy! Yeah, this is easily my favourite weapon of the game. It's like a plasma-firing Gatling gun. It's awesome. Unfortunately, the Borg make a surprise appearance, steal the MacGuffin juice, and kidnap your team leader. From here, the game starts to crank up the intensity and difficulty. Although again, I do recommend playing on hard from the very beginning. In contrast to the opening training simulation though, the Borg are a lot more threatening when they're quote-unquote real. They often beam in extra drones to have you completely surrounded when attacking, and if you don't keep an eye on your weapon's energy level, you can find yourself in a tough spot pretty quickly. Things get complicated though when you're given the chance to reenact Scorpion Parts 1 and 2, as it turns out some of Species 8472 are on board, and honestly, fuck these guys as well. After retrieving the MacGuffin juice, Voyager spots an incoming Harvester ship which is ready to tear Voyager apart. Because Voyager's weapons are offline, the Hazard team hops over to a derelict gunship. And by that I mean it's a ship which is a giant gun, in order to shoot the enemy ship before it can start slicing up Voyager. This is one of my favourite levels. There are some low gravity sections which make the platforming a lot more interesting, and the enemy types, automated defense robots, kind of remind me of the replicators from Star Trek SG-1. This is the first level you get to use the personal photon torpedo launcher, and it's awesome. This level also gives you another new weapon which I like to call the Palpatine gun. The ship originated from a space station at the centre of the region called the Forge. This station is maintaining a dampening field to trap the ships here, so Monroe suggests launching a counterattack to disable the station and stop the Forge for good. After a fun spacewalking segment, the Hazard team enter the station and begin the attack. This is where the game gets really intense. The crab-like bastards constantly swarm you, while the sires from Gears of War 2 hang back and throw fireballs at you. This is the time in the game where ammo and energy and health become really precious. As the rest of the Voyager crew attack the station, its energy core is destroyed and the dampening field is taken down. However, Monroe discovers the villain's evil plan. It turns out the Forge was created by the Vorsoth, who have been harvesting genetic material from hundreds of thousands of species so they can create an army of unstoppable warrior lifeforms which will allow them to conquer the entire galaxy. Of course! Yeah, it's really pulpy, but the design of the main bad guy is suitably Giger-esque, and through a quick dialogue exchange, there's a deeper backstory for the Vorsoth which is hinted at. What I truly love about this final section though is that after a hellish fight for survival in the rest of the station, the game allows you to supercharge all of your weapons for the final showdown. This boss battle is truly Doom level stuff and heaps of fun. You constantly have to be on the run, throwing out waves of destruction against the enemy. It's true cathartic destruction which feels earned after slowly acquiring all these weapons and learning how to best dispatch these enemies. Eventually Monroe is successful and beams back to Voyager just as the Forge explodes. With the ship and crew out of harm's way, Monroe takes command of the Hazard team and even gets some approval from Tuvok. It's a nice payoff to their relationship where they each learn something from one another. It succeeds in feeling like a Voyager episode. I could see this being a mini-series of sorts within the continuity of the show. As for multiplayer, obviously the original servers went dead long ago, but it turns out a group of fans went to the effort of essentially rebuilding the entire multiplayer component of Elite Force and releasing it for free as Star Trek Voyager Elite Force Holomatch. I'll post a link below where you can download it for yourself. Obviously, this being a pretty niche thing, you'll have to round up a group of friends in advance to play proper PvP. Try saying that 3 times fast. But there's also a mode against bots which is pretty good as well. It's a fun time and I highly recommend it if you and your friends are in the mood for some Star Trek themed carnage. So while Star Trek Voyager Elite Force does have some issues and is far from one of the best shooters you'll ever play, it's definitely worthwhile. It succeeds in its goal of being fun for Trekkies, but also a good enough shooter to be enjoyable for regular fans of the genre. If you can seek it out on disc or for download anywhere, it's a game which is still worth your time and stands as one of the better examples of Star Trek video games, even to this day. Thanks for watching guys. Reviews are something new to this channel and I'll try to have one out at least once a month. I have a long list of games I want to tackle, here are a few examples. If you want to know when those videos are up, I suggest you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to make sure you're notified. Until next time, this has been Rowan from SideQuest, have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.